Remembering and Forgetting Landscapes in Dialogue. Now, it's an exhibition that delves into the complex relationship between destruction and renewal within South African landscapes through the works that incorporate elements like fire and smoke and reclaimed materials such as rusted etching plates. Artist Kim Berman crafts a narrative that is both intensely personal but also fiercely political. Her use of materials that bear the marks of decay and also rebirth transforms them into powerful visual metaphors. And Kim joins us this morning. Professor Kim Berman joins us this morning to chat about this exhibition, of course, what we can expect. Good morning. Thank you, Prof. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
So obviously it's a conversation starter, and I'm looking at what you choose to remember, what you choose to forget, and how important that was for you in the work that's been portrayed. Tell us about that journey, that creative journey you underwent.
Well, this is a kind of retrospective exhibition of works from my past, from works that I'm choosing to remember, and elements of the past and the political past in dialogue with works that I'm doing now. Yeah. So I think that way of, I haven't had a solo exhibition for a long time, so I think it's about bringing out works and remembering and engaging with them, and noticing too that how the themes keep reoccurring in my work and in the politics of the world.
Which speaks to that cycle of life, decay, regeneration, transformation, but you know, is it enough? And even if we're looking at where we are post-apartheid, has enough been done? Where are those gaps? Talk to us about some of the sentiments that are evoked, especially when we're looking at regeneration versus decay.
So included in the exhibition is a body of work from the 80s, which was the height of the apartheid struggle. I was actually away in the US doing my master's. At the time I was engaged in the anti-apartheid struggle, and we were smuggling out works from Afropix Collective. So there was so much going on in the country where images were banned. Yeah. So images of any unrest were banned, and yet these images were not being seen in South Africa. So at that time in the 80s, I took a role as a kind of documenter. So my work were very dark, very black and white, very much about the political struggle, working in books a lot, artist books. So I made etchings in black and white from the Afropix Collective photographs, and then bound them in books. And some of those books are on exhibition. From 1988, height of the state of emergency, from 1985. In fact, the earliest work on the show is 1981, when I was a student at Wits, also during the resistance. And so I think I've always seen my artwork as a way to respond to the current political situation, and also to be an observer, a documenter, a recorder of some kind in the tradition of art history.
And a mirror for us to reflect back. And I mean, I want to pick up on the point because, yes, some of your works are darker, and there's that contrast between black and white, but there's also symbolisms of fire and smoke that's also coming through in some of the works, and that obviously speaks to the ecological trauma as well that we also inherited. And I wonder if you could touch on that a little bit more.
Well, Fire has always been a very strong metaphor for my work. When I returned home and they started the process of the TRC hearings, I did a series called Fires of the Truth Commission. And the thing about fire is, in South Africa, fires burn the veld, on the high veld, and burn to regenerate, make way for new growth. So the idea of fire was always about not only damage, but ridding the earth of old and making way for new. And interesting, fire has been a sort of constant theme in my own work as well. So I started a NGO called Artist Proof Studio when I returned home in 1991, actually, so 35 years ago. And Artist Proof Studio is a center of printmaking. And in 2003, there was a fire that burned down the studio. So I was busy with fires at the time.
Putting out fire, being tested with fire.
So it's very much about renewal. How do you build back from the fire? And then again, during this period of preparing for my exhibition, I had a home fire of my study. I was lighting my gas heater, and the fire burned down my study. So again, it was sifting through the remains of the fire and really hearing those kind of messages around the importance of renewal and an empathy with what was going on in the world. There's so many devastating wars in the Middle East, in Ukraine, in Gaza. You know, that idea of loss from destruction was an act of empathy as well in terms of the work. So the very latest work in my show is about what I call the ghosts of that fire. Sure. My grandparents, pictures of my grandparents that had burnt in the fire, and their kind of spirit in discovering something about them. And so I made some books about that fire.
That evolution and your journey, it's well portrayed. I mean, as you also just look at that evolution as a society, what gives you hope if you look back in hindsight, given how you've spoken about the destruction, and that's how we need to rebuild or continue building?
Well, I'm a very optimistic person. I'm an educator, and I love what I do. I love working with young people, and I've been a teacher for 31 years at the University of Johannesburg in the Visual Arts Department. So this is actually my last year of my retirement year year. I'm 65 this year, so that's my last year. So I'm in a phase of transition, of rediscovering myself as a visual artist, and not only as an educator, but certainly Artist Proof Studio is a center where that trains young printmakers and young artists to be self-sufficient artists in the world. And so I think my work, even though there's a darkness, there's also lightness. It's represented in the landscape. There's always light on the horizon, and there's color coming back into my work. Quite a lot. That's around hope. And so some of the images of the landscape and sunflower fields. Sunflowers are one of the themes and the metaphors in the work, because sunflowers represent this idea of mourners with their bowed heads. But when their heads are bowed, they drop seeds to regenerate the growth. So there's always that kind of paradox of the light in the work.
Well, light is law, Prof. That's what's been said. And I wonder if we look at your illustrious career, just as we wrap up, what's been a highlight for you? A firm favorite, something that has changed you? Is it fair to ask you that? Because it's like asking a parent to choose their favorite child.
Well, you know, I think my work at the University of Johannesburg for 31 years has been a very, very important part of my life as well. And I think being involved in the research and supervising students and master students and PhD students has been it's a real privilege to be able to help students transition to their own careers. And that's something I've loved always. Possibly to the neglect of my own practice as an artist. So coming back has been quite nerve-wracking, a little bit tentative, but very exciting for me, because it is a new chapter. So I think, if I think of something that is a real achievement for me, I think it's around Artist Proof Studio and our programs at the university.
Well, Prof, that story continues. Thank you for taking us down memory lane and for chatting about your illustrious career, but obviously also just this exhibition. And we wish you all the best of luck as you turn over the next page of your journey. Professor in Visual Art at UJ, Professor Kim Berman, chatting about remembering and forgetting landscapes in dialogue. That exhibition currently on at UJ, and of course also just a life post-retirement plans.